Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in the Twin Cities, it's time for Minneapolis St. Paul Business Radio. Now, here's your host.
And hello, everyone. This is John Ray. Welcome again to Minneapolis St. Paul Business Radio. And I've got a great guest today. I've been looking forward to this one. Ronald Mitchellette. He's with Mitchellette and Associates, and also known as RJ. He gave me permission ahead of time to call him RJ because that's what all his friends call him. So, RJ, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you. So tell us a little bit about you and your firm. How do you help folks out there?
Well, I guess we can start with the fact that I've got 40 years of consulting small businesses, and that includes being in business for myself, having been in the battlefield and having the scars to show it. So I guess that qualifies me to be a consultant and be able to advise people from the get-go when they start their company, when they try to grow their company, and even when they go public, because we do have some success stories of startups that wind up going public. And we have several of those varying in disciplines. One is in the pet business, and another one is in the biotechnology business, stem cell research. And I think that advice has been good advice because we've been able to finance these companies, again, from the get-go through bridge lending, all the way to the fact that they survive and move forward into the professional area, which is going public.
Now, RJ, if you can, there's a lot of talk about learning. I'm struck by what you said about you've got the scars, which is a nice way of, or one way of saying the experience that you've got. That's tremendous. Talk about maybe one or two of the biggest lessons you have from those scars, if you will, that you're able to pass on to those you work with.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, you bring that up. We're introducing onto our website 2 new synergy partners who are in the psychological testing discipline. And I am a firm believer in the right stuff. And if you don't have the right stuff, stay out of being an entrepreneur. Because being an entrepreneur, you need to be thick-skinned, you need to believe in yourself, you need to have self-confidence, you need to believe in God or there is no future. And the whole story for me is that my first company I started was a real success through acquisition, and I took it public, and that gave me my start. But unfortunately, with a little money in my pocket, I decided to try my luck a second time. And the second time didn't work as well as the first time. And so I lost a lot of money, including my house, to the bank. And I would tell you that at that point, if I didn't trust myself and believe in God, I would have been history. So when I got out of that jam in my second company, I started a third company. And that company was raising $5 million to buy an undercapitalized bank. And I became the chairman of that bank and ran that bank for 5 years before we sold it to a bigger bank. And then I started teaching. And I began to even write. And I wrote this book, Entrepreneurial Decision Making. And I would suggest that every entrepreneur or aspiring entrepreneur read the book, because there's the first 3 chapters talk about how that entrepreneur needs to prepare to become an entrepreneur, not the least of which is making sure that entrepreneur, his or her spouse, has the blessing to become an entrepreneur. Because if you don't have your spouse's blessing, you're ground zero before you start. And that even transfers to family members, because so many family members will say, "You what? You're going to be an entrepreneur? You're going to start your own business? Are you crazy?"
Right.
So that's part of the dialogue or the rhetoric right in the beginning. And you have to have a good answer for that. You can't just say, "Well, I'm on a wing and a prayer and we'll see what happens." You have to prepare for it. You have to prepare to put your house and your 3rd kid up for collateral if you're going to raise money through a bank in the form of a loan. You have to be prepared to lose those assets of yours if things go sour. And all that has to be discussed ahead of time in your preparation for being an entrepreneur. It's like a education in and of itself.
So you mentioned coming back from, a very difficult time with your second business. But then you actually started out with your first business was very successful. I guess the question is, for those that are thinking about starting a business, I mean, what's the best place to come from in starting a business? I mean, do you have to go through it a couple times to end up being successful, or talk about that to a prospective entrepreneur? What's the best place to come from when they start a business?
Well, in my case, the training ground was I was involved with 5 major companies that specialized in financing small businesses. So in interviewing people who already were entrepreneurs in business who came to my company as an employee to borrow money, I learned a lot from them. And that was preparation for me to prepare myself to go into business for myself. And initially, I would interview people and get their credit approval because I worked for finance companies. And I would say to myself, if they could do it, why can't I? And I have the education. What's keeping me from being an entrepreneur? What's keeping me from controlling my own destiny? What's keeping me from raising enough money in my family that I can make it for my kids and get them to school and everything else? So I began to challenge myself over the first 20 years of my career. And that challenge translated into me saying one day, I want to go into business for myself. So I took the knowledge of 20 years of interviewing other entrepreneurs and learning from their mistakes and starting my own company. And I think that's why my first company was a success, because I used all of what I learned from others and their mistakes to avoid the mistakes in my own company.
Folks, we're here chatting with Ronald R.J. Mitchellette, and he is with Mitchellette and Associates. So what kind of training does an aspiring entrepreneur need? And I guess if you would also dig into just not what they need to know, but mindset, because your book the title of your book gets at mindset when you're talking about entrepreneurial decisions, right? And how those decisions are made.
Yes.
And mindset is a little different than what you know. It's kind of your attitude, right? So,
right.
Yeah. So give us your thoughts on that.
Well, if I were, and I do, advise people how to start a business, because that's number one, the first thing I would do before I would start a business is that I would get into a networking mode, because that is very important to build a network, so that before you go into business, you have the support of the network. Mm. And that support includes finance companies, bankers, entrepreneurs that have already started their business and are successful, even ones that are not successful, because, like I said earlier, you learn a lot from the ones that fail, too. So it's a training ground that intercepts the actual battlefield. So it's just like in the military. I'm a veteran, and I went through basic training, and you go through basic training so you can survive in battle. And you don't know if you're going to survive in battle until you get into battle. And that's the real test. You don't know if you're going to run like hell from the battlefield, or right, whether you're going to stick it out and see if you live through it. Mm. So that's the best analogy I could give for being an entrepreneur, is that you've really got to believe in yourself and hope that you can make it through the battle. And then you learn as you go. You learn how to dodge a bullet. You learn how to avoid a landmine before you stand on it. And that's what you do in the networking fields. You really learn from other people who have been tested, like myself.
So you mentioned the personality test that you advocate. It sounds like you advocate those, and this is a question, not a statement, but it sounds like you advocate those more for understanding yourself than it is understanding whether you're going to succeed or fail. I mean, you don't, as you say, you don't know that till you get into it. But what you can figure out ahead of time is what your own personality is that enables you to be successful or to avoid failure.
Yeah, what you're made out of.
Right.
I think we all have to do a self-assessment. I don't even think we should rely on tests or a psychologist or psychiatrist or any of those folks to tell us what we already know about us. Mm. And it's what we know about us that drives whether or not we want to follow a particular career, mm-hmm, whether it's medicine, engineering, or being an entrepreneur. And I have always been basically independent, self-motivated, very key personality trait to be self-motivated, in denial of my weaknesses. So,
aren't we all?
And with that, you look at yourself in the mirror one day and you say, I just want to be in business for myself. I want to control my own destiny. I don't want to work for somebody else. I don't want to have to wait for them to have a good cup of coffee before they promote me. Mm. Those are the things that you don't even come across until you come into the work field and work for somebody else. And so often, you're working for somebody else, as I have worked for others, and you even wonder how they got their job. So as soon as you start wondering how Mr. X or Miss X gets their job, that's the beginning of the seed to become an entrepreneur. Is why am I doing this? Why am I working for this guy or gal? Why can't I do this for myself? Mm.
So RJ, what you get involved, particularly when it comes to capital and raising money for businesses. I mean, let's talk about how you raise money for a brand new business, the right out of the gate. How does that work?
Well, it begins, like I say in my book, going back to family members and getting their approval for even becoming an entrepreneur. You borrow money from your dad, your parents, your brothers, your sisters, friends, and that essentially is called seed money.
Mm-hmm.
And every entrepreneur needs seed money to plant the seed in the soil in order to grow whatever you're trying to grow. So you really have to have an endorsement from family members once you get their blessing to lend you the money. Now, if that should not happen, then you have to rely on your network and going to your network and telling your network what you want to do, that you have a very good idea, that this idea is worth introducing to the marketplace. And you hope that somebody in your network says, well, Ron, that's a good idea. I think I'll lend you some money. And that's the way it begins. You can forget about going to a conventional bank with a startup. That's just a pipe dream. Unless you're willing to pledge, like I said earlier, your house or your third kid to cover your dream. Otherwise, you still have to rely on personal investment.
Well, and particularly true with a business where there's no track record off which the bank can base a lending decision, right? And I mean, banks, the rules, you've been a chairman of a bank. I mean, the rules on bank lending have gotten much stricter in recent years, over the last 10 and 20 years, in terms of being able to lend to emerging companies, right?
Well, that's a very good point, and I didn't even visit that arena. The problems with the banks is their restrictions as to what they can loan on, who they can loan to, and the amount of the loan. All that is covered by banking law. And even if you're talking to a loan officer that is complementary to your idea, they still have to abide by the banking law. So again, that becomes an obstacle. So when anybody comes to me that says they want to borrow from the bank, and I call up a banker friend and say, would you be interested in XYZ, who's developing a ABC? And most of the time, the answer is yes. What kind of collateral do they have?
Right.
And it's a foolish question, because if the guy is just starting off, the company has no collateral. It has no history. So the next question is, well, what kind of personal collateral does the entrepreneur have? Well, he lives in a $500,000 home and he only owes $300,000. Oh, well, that's $200,000 that we can use as a pledge against the risk of the loan. And it goes on and on until somebody decides at the banking level that there's enough collateral to cover the risk.
So, RJ, let's talk about how you mentioned going to friends and family to start your initial round, if you will, your initial financing to start the business. How does an entrepreneur successfully navigate, I guess, really creating a family relationship that's now also a business relationship, right? I mean, because that can be tough to navigate. So give advice to entrepreneurs on how to keep good graces with your family members that you've borrowed money from to start that business. How do you do that?
Well, in my case, when I decided to become an entrepreneur, I decided that I didn't know enough people to borrow money from, because I'd never proven my business skills because I worked for somebody else. And unless that somebody else wanted to give me a good recommendation, that was probably an effort that would go for naught. So I decided right from the get-go that instead of trying to finance my own dream, I would go out and buy somebody else's dream. And that meant that I would find a small company, maybe a fledgling small company, which I did in the machine shop business, making precision machine parts. And I lucked out, went to this particular company, met a gentleman by the name of Curtis Price, and he had a machine shop, and it was in his garage. And I said, you've got the beginnings of something that I'd like to build, and I would like to be your partner and see if I can build your business for you, because you're too busy machining parts in your business to go out and build your business. And again, luck as it might be, he said, that's a great idea. And over, months of talk and discussion and working in the machine shop myself, we became good friends. And he said, I like that idea. So I became a partner in the machine shop. So we went from a garage machine shop in 3 years to 20,000 square feet.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was. It was a good ride. And that company then grew to the point where I began to now acquire other small businesses. And I didn't stay in the same industry. I acquired businesses in other industries so that I could hedge my bet. In case the machine shop industry would flounder, I would have other industries that hopefully would grow. And I did that. And before I knew it, 5 years into starting my business, I was in 4 industries and had bought 3 companies in addition to the machine shop. And that's the group I took public.
Now, I'm really curious about one thing about your purchase of the machine shop, particularly in a environment where so many people are oriented toward technology or medical technology, the stuff that you might call whiz bang in a way. You bought a old line machine shop and really turned that into something. And so talk about, to a prospective entrepreneur, the opportunities that exist in, so-called dull businesses where, maybe there's not a lot of focus on right now.
Well, if somebody comes into me, and thank God many have, and ask me how to get into a business, the first thing I tell them is that what are they good at? And start writing down what you're good at. Are you a good writer? Are you a good accountant? Are you good with numbers? Are you a people person? Are you a salesperson? What are you good at? And that's exactly why I've just introduced 2 psychologists into my company, so we can use proven testing techniques to try to find the character of the would-be entrepreneur that will ensure some probability of success. And before that, or before I even went to this level, I would just use my instincts. And I've told would-be entrepreneurs, I don't think being an entrepreneur is for you. I've said that. I don't think you're ready for that. I think you need to go to work for somebody else. Try going to work for a small company and be on the inside of that small company and assume the role of an owner, even though you're not an owner, to see how you would react. And several have done that, and then they some have come back to me and said that, they've gone into the marine products business and they really like it and they enjoy it and they want to go into it themselves. And so they've got the groundwork for that. And that's a better way to ensure success than to just try to come up with a better mousetrap. And people have come to me for that too, a better mousetrap, especially cooks in the restaurant business. Mm-hmm. They are notorious for a new recipe or a new way to open up a restaurant. And they're almost doomed to failure before they start. And again, I tell those folks the same thing. Yeah, well, have you worked in the restaurant industry? No. Well, don't you think if you want to open up a restaurant, you ought to try working in one first? Have you been a waiter? Have you been a cook? No. Well, then that's the first order of business, is go to a training school, which is on-the-job training. Mm.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So let's talk about when an entrepreneur should take on partners.
Say that again.
When an entrepreneur should take on a partner or partners.
Oh, yeah. That's a very good question. Mm-hmm. And that is when he or she recognizes their weakness. A partner should be one that complements the weakness of the initial partnership. So if your person is weak in accounting, the first thing he should do or she should do is, assuming that the business is growing and justifies an accountant, is hire an accountant. If a person is strong in marketing and they started a company that is focused more on numbers, well, then you have to hire a marketing specialist, somebody that is good at marketing, good at selling. In my initial business that I talked about, the first order of business that I recognize is that I'm really a lousy salesman. And I needed to hire somebody that was a good salesman, because I'm not a day-to-day sales guy. Even though I started my career in sales, I was not a really good sales guy. The only thing that made me a success were the people that I was interviewing needed me as much as I needed them, or else I wouldn't have been the success I was. If I were selling yo-yos, I would not have sold better yo-yos.
Well, so, if I can stop you there, because you just hit on something that I think really harkens back to an earlier point you made that's really, really good, which is what you just reflected was your understanding of yourself, right? And, yes. and knowing what you're good at, what you're not good at, and understanding that and making sure that you manage your business accordingly, which is what Correct. You were talking about earlier.
Right.
Yeah.
You have to manage your business every hour of the day. And that goes into the weekend, and that carries forward into your vacation. And your spouse that might say, "Can't you ever think of something else besides your business?" That's when things go wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to be an entrepreneur, you have to be all things to all people all the time. Mm.
So, wow, this has been great, RJ, and I could keep on talking with you, but I want to cover just a couple more quick points before we let you go. So let's give another shout out on your book. So your book is Entrepreneurial Decisions.
Entrepreneurial Decision Making.
I'm sorry, Entrepreneurial Decision Making. Talk about your book and the folks that for which this book is a good fit.
Well, the book in itself is a how-to manual on how to become an entrepreneur.
Mm.
So if you want to fly an airplane and become a pilot, you buy books on how to fly an airplane. And this is the same situation.
Right.
If you want to be an entrepreneur, you should buy this book because it's 380 pages of my experience on how to be a successful entrepreneur. And this book is available through Barnes & Noble, and it's also available on my website, Mitchellette and Associates.com.
Mm-hmm.
So you can buy this book direct. You can buy this book online, and you can even buy it as a digital book. So I've covered all the bases for learning how to become an entrepreneur through the purchase of this book. And I would suggest anybody, even though here we're talking, and I would suggest to anybody they buy this book. It's 29 pages, 29 chapters of good stuff.
Mm. And folks, we'll have a link to where you can buy the book in the show notes, so you'll be able to find that there. So one other quick question: talk about the kind of clients that you work with now. What kind of clients are a good fit for you?
Well, in the beginning, there were usually small would-be entrepreneurs that would come to me because I used to teach entrepreneurship at several universities. I have the rank of adjunct professor, and I've taught entrepreneurship at many major universities. And the way that they first came to me was through my teaching, and not through the book, because I didn't author a book yet. So they came through my teaching, and students would come to me and say, how do they have an idea? How do they promote the idea? How do you get into business? And that's how I started, really doing a freebie consulting as a teacher. And then that evolved into the fact that, well, if I'm giving free advice, why don't I charge for it? So
right.
That began the birth of my first stab at a consulting business, is to open up many different versions of Mitchellette and Associates. Gotcha.
Well, this has been great. And I know that there's something out of here that's our time together that's rung a bell for someone that they want to dive deeper and know a little more. And I would love it, RJ, if you could share whatever contact information you like to give folks so they can be in touch.
Well, my business telephone number is 612-715-9217. My office is at Calhoun Beach Club, which most local people know, 300 Suite 300 in Minneapolis, Minnesota, 55416. My website is Mitchelletteandassociates.com, and my book is Entrepreneurial Decision Making, available at Barnes & Noble. And other than that, I'm not sure how else they can send me smoke signals. Maybe I'll see them.
Well, I think you've given them enough coordinates that they ought to be able to find you with all that. So that's great. Ronald, also known as RJ Mitchellette, Mitchellette and Associates. RJ, it's been great to have you on the show.
Well, thank you, John, for the opportunity.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. Very much. Thank you. Folks, just a quick reminder that I would love it. And by the way, it's not about me and it's not about Business RadioX. It's about our guests, great entrepreneurs, business leaders like RJ. I'd love it if you could go and find our show on your favorite podcast app, wherever you're listening now, and rate and review the show and give us a 5-star review. And again, it's not about me. It's about our guests, because we want folks that need the services of business leaders like RJ to be able to find the show so they can engage with them. So if you could do that for us, we would greatly appreciate it. And if you want to see more of the shows that we have on the Business Radio X network, you can find us on the web at businessradiox.com. So for my guest, RJ Mitchellette, I'm John Ray. Join us next time here on Minneapolis St. Paul Business Radio.